Hi everyone, today I'm going to be interviewing Xazmin, who is a molecular biologist at Karma Biotechnologies. She received her Ph.D. in cancer biology and then transitioned into autoimmune work. She is from the Navajo Nation and is able to share a unique perspective on how language and cultural norms can influence our understanding of the world. She wants to encourage everyone to pursue their passions and to reach out to resources and mentors when they're in need of guidance or help. So let's go find out about her STEM journey.
I am Xazmin Custer. I am Diné or Navajo from the Navajo Nation. I live in the greater Los Angeles area and work at a biotech in Torrance, California called Karma Biotechnologies. I am the principal scientist there and department head of the molecular biology department.
What kind of scientist are you?
I received my PhD in cancer biology, but the biotech company I work for, we're an autoimmune focused company. I introduced myself as the department head of the molecular biology department. That is really important because like cancer biology, you learn so many techniques. My focus was once in cell death studies, understanding the mechanisms of cell death or how a cell dies, particularly in cancer. And then at transition to trying to understand the metabolism of cells. And that's what led me to California as a biotech, someone who has joined the biotech world. The autoimmune disease focus is really a shift, but the techniques to study a cell are still remain the same. That's molecular biology. So yeah, I probably will call myself a molecular biologist, even though for so long I've considered myself a cancer biologist. But the techniques are they translate over to many other sciences.
What led you to make that shift?
I wanted to try the biotech world because for myself, I had been in academia from the time I was an undergrad, spent 4 years doing that, started my career in terms of science, like pursuing academic science in a lab when I was a sophomore in college. And then that led to doing internships in various labs and then going on to grad school, spending 5 years as a grad student, getting data, doing the things I needed to. And then I went to do a postdoc. And the postdoc was what I started at City of Hope here in California. And halfway through that, my advisor, she transferred to University of California, Irvine, so UCI. And that already chronicles more than a decade of academic training. And I understood how the academic world worked. And I wanted to be able to jump into a project where I could see a goal finished and completed. Or even if it wasn't completed, I had the time and I had to make the most of it. And I think that's what biotech allows me to do. I'm able to make actionable goals with a team and see if we can check them off. So I like that. And I think that's what was the biggest position, really wanting to cure something. And it's autoimmune disease rather than cancer. But I think that our technology can cross over to other diseases.
How and why did you first get interested in this field?
My interest in cancer biology is a unique one. I would say that it was first cell death mechanisms that got me into cancer biology. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say cancer biology is interesting is because of my cultural background. I'm Native American, a Southwest tribe, the Navajo. And in my culture, we do not use the word cancer. At least when I grew up, I was told not to say that word. It's a taboo word. And there are a lot of things about my culture where, even going to medical school, which is something I had considered when I was a teenager, I remember my parents telling me like, oh, if you do that, you're going to have to do you're going to work with cadavers. You're not supposed to do that as a Navajo. There was a lot of seeming restrictions to this curiosity. And I never was given a good enough answer as to why I couldn't do that. But I told them, I'm like, I want to be a scientist. I want to keep going through this path. And so, of course, I end up in a cancer biology lab. And and I didn't have to work with any dead bodies or anything like that, even though I was interested in cell death pathways. My interest in cell death pathways was really, how can we improve therapies that aim to kill cancer, but cancer is hard to kill. So obviously the death pathways are skewed, they're messed up somehow. And that's really what I explored as a graduate student. One of the things that came from that was this discovery of the metabolism of the cells was impacting or playing a role. And that then led to my next project as a postdoc of cancer cell metabolism and how that was being manipulated by cancer cells. So I think that academically, it was always my interest. Oh, this was interesting. Hey, I found something else out. So it was like I was just going along trying to get an answer. My current interest in terms of autoimmune disease is really interesting because of my boss and his personal relationship. His mother is affected by an autoimmune disease. And when I could hear his story, it was again a reminder of, hey, science has the power to heal people. It has the power to really make a difference in people's lives. And that's actually, I think, bottom line, why I also was interested in cancer biology ultimately, was I want to be able to help people. Med school was my first desire because I thought that was the best way to help a person. But as I continued on in my scientific career, I realized, hey, science also helps people. If I'm a good scientist, I can help people.
What type of projects and experiments do you currently work on?
The current experiments that my team does is to be able to identify the DNA that we are really creating. So we're doing the genetic engineering of a particular plasmid. And plasmid are these small little DNAs that we can put into a lipid nanoparticle. Lipid nanoparticles are our delivery system that get to cells, into tissue. And so my team is really, our role is to characterize that DNA, characterize it in terms of expression. Like, is it being expressed by cells, or is there a better expression system that we can create? Can we show that the protein is functional? So there are various techniques that we call qPCR, that we call Western blot analysis, but they all help us identify or visualize on a gel, on a membrane, these proteins or these DNA. So it's really exciting that we can track where it's going. And I think that's probably the function of my team, is to really characterize where these are going and how they look, and how much we need to give to the our sister department, which is immunology. Give them like, hey, this is the profile of everything that we've done. So then they do all of the other cool work of characterizing the immune response. A lot of hard work there, but we want to give them the best information to proceed with their experiments.
What is the most rewarding part of your job?
I think the most rewarding part is that eureka moment. It's like when something works. A great example of that is just this week. We have designed new DNA to put into cells, and it has a green fluorescent protein on it. So it's supposed to, when we look at it under a microscope, we'll see green cells if it's incorporated into the genome. And when we looked under the microscope and we saw green in our new construct, or our new plasmids, that just made me happy. And that didn't make me happy, it made everyone else happy. So we're like, hey, we're on to the right, we have the right, I guess, idea. We're making progress. And I think something as simple as an experiment working brings a lot of joy to me. But that's just one aspect of it. Another thing I really like is mentoring. So in academia, you get this opportunity a lot. And that's when you see someone new to the science come in and you start to help them. Like you help them do experiments. You help them think like a scientist. And by that, I mean, like, you pose a question, you're able to design an experiment. You have controls, the right controls, and then you see them do the experiment. They might fail in terms of, technique wise, that takes some practice, but then you see them as they begin, as time goes by, you see how much they progress. To me, I love being able to see a young scientist like blossom. That's really fulfilling to me.
What challenges have you faced in pursuing this career?
Again, I think it goes back to that cultural background. Growing up, I did not have a scientist in my family. I don't know many people who have scientists in their family, but I certainly didn't even have like a mentor to go to say, hey, would you go about this? I didn't even know what graduate school was until I got to college. Like I had no idea like the path that it would take to get to become a scientist. For me, the challenge really was just not having any representation. Anyone that I could go to within my community. I come from a small town in Arizona called Page. So there was not representation. And then as I got to college, again, you're just one small person in a bigger sea, I guess, in a bigger, like larger group of people. And I had great mentors, like people who I could turn to encourage me along. But again, they have different backgrounds and experiences that they might not understand what it meant for a young Native girl to be out of her comfort zone. Or they might not have been aware of the challenges I faced as a Native American woman, with challenges or problems that were going on like back home. Something that a lot of Native Americans face are like just family things that are going on in their family, a lot of drama, a lot of things that are beyond their control. And you feel like I have to be home to help. I have to return home because I will help my family or whatever it might be. I think that those are real challenges that I can understand when I do meet other Native Americans, they have to face that. But being able to stand on my own 2 feet, that was something I had to do. And my parents, my siblings, they for all the challenges that they were facing, I think like their support was really important to me to like stay focused. And I did, and I continued on, and I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I had that support from them. But it was a challenge. Sometimes I felt like, hey, why am I out here doing this when I could be helping them? And I think that they didn't want me to feel any resentment if I did come back. And I don't. I'm glad that 15 years later I can see, okay, all that type of like mentally or emotionally hard work has paid off.
As a high schooler, when you were like choosing what you wanted to study or where you wanted to go to college, and you didn't feel like you had any mentors in the field or representation in the fields you were interested in, what made you still pursue it? How were you able to navigate those challenges? And then when you got to college and you felt torn between these two worlds, how did you go about navigating that?
In high school, I had a teacher who prepared me mentally, I guess. His goal was to prepare everyone. And I remember a lot of people hated his class. He was my English teacher. And a lot of people didn't like that type of work. He also was someone who I thought he was very fair. And he couldn't really be bought. I think like you put in the work and you got a grade. So the project he gave everyone was to calculate the amount of money and time and just work that it would take to get your 4-year college degree. So I had done that. And what happened is when I went to college, I knew I was going to go to college. Like I was very firm in that for myself. My goal then was to go to medical school because that's all I had known. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go to medical school. I'm going to become a doctor. And I knew that I had to go to college for that. My first day, I was living in the dorms in Tucson, Arizona. I went to the University of Arizona. They drove the 6 hours from Page, Arizona, down to Tucson, Arizona, which is in the south. And They helped me bring my things into the dorm room. And they're like, well, you know what, let's go grab lunch and then we're going to drop you off at this corner and we're going to head home. That was sort of the introduction I had to college. And I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. So I had my lunch with my parents and then they dropped me off as they said, and they left because they had 6 hours to drive back to Page. And I think that type of scrappiness, or even not behavior, but that type of action is somewhat indicative of even their upbringing. So as natives, we're very resilient. And I think that they really did instill in me a sense of cultural pride of my ancestors and of like the hard work they went through. So I knew for myself, like, hey, I'm going to suck it up. I'm going to suck it up for like today. And then the next day, it was a day by day thing. And for me, I could thrive in that environment because I think I always had this core type of knowledge that I couldn't explain at the time. And it's sometimes still difficult to identify how is within me that I could survive. And I really think that it goes back to like understanding who I am in the broader context of society and history. Overall, the Navajos are very small. They're part of the Native American population, which is very small in this country. And I think that knowing my history, knowing that, hey, there's more to my purpose than just being able to make it here. I now need to go and do something more. So that I think was within me, that hope to do something. When I got to college and realized that there was more, that you could become a scientist rather than a medical doctor, that was eye-opening. And I think for me, what got me through that was just meeting people who were in grad school. So I got into a lab. I was able to enjoy, these friendships with graduate students, with postdocs. And that opened just a whole new world. And I think my curiosity of wanting to know more is what got me through. I couldn't just hide away and say, hey, no, I want to be a medical doctor. I'm not going to spend my time with these people. I just wanted to learn more about it. And the more I got involved, I think the more knowledge I received. I think learning, it pushes me to do more. It makes me want to know what else is out there. And I think that love of learning honestly pushed me through my graduate school career and continues to push me as a scientist. I love learning. So,
are there any people who really stood out to you as taking the time to mentor you, or who were a big role model for you?
When I was younger, like in high school, I probably would not have counted this English teacher as a mentor. He was just someone I respected. But I think that part of me not being able to identify him as a mentor was because I just didn't have the language, or like I didn't have that concept of, oh, these are mentors for me. It wasn't until later, probably when I got into graduate school, but I had mentors before that I just didn't know how to name. It was in graduate school that I feel like the advisor that I chose, Dr. Kellikar, she was my mentor. She helped me navigate graduate school, like what the requirements for the program were, as well as how I would achieve those. And even moving forward, she had ideas for like, oh, you can pursue a postdoc, you can do these things, you can focus on that. Like she had ideas, and knowing that, hey, she knows this world, maybe I should listen to her, which I listened to her. And then when I went on and did a postdoc with Dr. May Kong, again, their personalities and ways of thinking are very different. May was a great mentor. I should say. She was a great mentor for me, since I'm no longer associated with her lab, but I think she is still a great mentor. And like I have no problem reaching out to her again. And so the mentor that I do have now, who is the CEO of the company, I think he is fantastic. I had my first child when I started this job with Karma Biotech, and the type of, the congratulations that he gave to me and my husband at the time, like I'll always remember that the support that I had from that small team at my current company. I think that mentors have definitely helped me in more the ways than one. Like there's the science aspect, there's that of navigating the different, academic or career worlds. There's that of a personal, like being a personal coach or like cheerleader at least for what life throws at you. And I've had many mentors come into my life, but now that I know how a mentor looks, I can then say, hey, that's a mentor, that's a mentor. And they function in different parts of my life. I think one mentor that I really, really appreciate is the person who actually told me or informed me about the opportunity to be a panelist at the City of STEM. And that mentor, she's done so much in terms of like helping me visualize what I can do beyond the science. Like how can I be a good mom in science? Like juggling being a mom and doing like this intense career. How can I be an advocate for science as well as do my job as a scientist? So there are these different ways that I'm beginning to say, this is how I can put this hat on and work on this. And these different mentors who have done that, who have crossed over and done those various things, I can now look to them and say, hey, I need some advice and on this. And I think that that's how I'm now navigating through it is I know how to ask for help.
That's one of the hardest first steps is going and asking for help, but even identifying that you can do that and that you need it. Sometimes that's so difficult to be like, oh, I'll just figure it out on my own. And then you're like, wait, no, there's other people out there who want to help, who can help, who've been through this.
Yes.
Yeah. One thing that kind of came up is you're talking about how college professors and maybe other students didn't understand what it meant for you to be Native and be at college and be away from your family. But when you meet other people who are Native, you understand a lot of the struggles that they're going through or can have a better understanding of it. And so I was just wondering, is there anything that you want to share that you wish people knew and you wish more people understood?
That's a really great question because for me, I do know when I meet fellow natives in science, it's different than when I meet someone new in science or someone like if I were to return to Arizona, return to my home community, and probably, or let's say I were to go into a classroom. So my sister is a SPED teacher, so like the special education, the children with learning disabilities, and she focuses on middle school students or focuses on helping middle school students. But before that, when she was getting her degree at the University of Arizona, her training was all with not kindergarten, K through 5. So they're like fourth and fifth graders, maybe third graders. But I remember once while I was in graduate school, I came to Tucson to visit her and go home to Paige. And I remember she's like, can you stop at my school? I have to teach, but I want my students to meet you. And they were, I think, fourth and fifth grade. There was like a class of fourth and fifth grade boys. And it was so funny and interesting because they were not, maybe one or two were Native American, like from the Tohono O'odham, but a lot of them were like Mexican American students. And I come in and she's like, so how many of you have heard of a scientist? And they're like, oh, like Albert Einstein. That was the scientist that they imagined. Yeah. So she's like, yeah, he's a scientist, but guess what? My sister's a scientist too. And so I come in and I remember she's like, tell them what you do. And I'm like, okay, I'm a cancer biologist. They're like, what is cancer? These are fourth and fifth grade students who, for me, when I started to talk to them about cancer, like I really needed my sister's help, first of all, to tell them like it's a disease that is terrible. And so when they were beginning to realize that it's a disease, they're like, oh, it's like a virus. You know, to help them understand it's something that debilitates your health. Um, that's when you begin to hear them say like, oh, like this, oh, my grandma died of this. Like you begin, that's where I can begin to identify like, hey, I know these stories. I'm familiar with the type of challenges that such young people have that they shouldn't have had to have. And for me to sit in there as a scientist and hear these fourth and fifth grade students talk about their life up to that point, many times it's sometimes not disease that haunts their family. It's addictions or substance abuse. It's uh, it's all these other things that are affecting their family dynamics, so that they actually can't even understand the science behind it. They don't. It's shielded from them because they're dealing with so much other trauma. Um, and I think in that sense, for me as a Native American person coming in, if I were to mentor a freshman student or so anyone younger than that, it's really just being able to listen to their story and then helping them with the right tools to then like therapy if it needs to be even therapy. So like, hey, let's get this in order. Science we can always jump into. Science can be somewhat of an escape. Science can do so much for us, but there are other parts to the life that needs to be more fulfilling, and that's where I feel like a mentor would have, just someone who would listen, would have been very helpful. So yeah, that's a great question that I am still going to think about. Yeah, I'm definitely going to think more about, but it's a great question when it comes to like, especially Native American students, and it's not limited to Native American. It's broader, but for sure with natives, I know that I have a soft spot in my heart for them, just knowing what my nephews or cousins or siblings have had to go through. So
I appreciate you like emphasizing that it's we have to listen and try and understand people's perspectives and where they're coming from and what they're dealing with. And then also what I was kind of hearing in there is like they didn't necessarily know like what cancer was, but they knew people in their lives who maybe had dealt with it, but they didn't know the name and the science behind it. And so maybe because they're dealing with a lot of other things in their lives, that's not as much of a priority.
Yeah, I actually, I like that you pointed out that, because this has come up repeatedly in this interview already, that many times I think that part of the struggle for me initially was not knowing the language or concepts. Even though I speak English fluently and it's my first language, I think that many times in my childhood there were things that were happening around me, and my parents don't speak English. I mean, they speak English, but it's not their primary language. They first learn Navajo, and so for them, when they're discussing something especially that is hard to describe, something sciencey is not. Even with English speaking people, science can be a very technical language. So just trying to put concepts together as to what's going on, as well as science can be abstract. When I talk about what's happening in the cell, I can visualize it in my way of visualizing things. But oftentimes when I'm with my fellow scientists and we're talking about transcription or translation, those are like processes that it's all in our head. Like we can see it in our head, but other people who aren't aware of the terminology are like, what are they talking about? And I think that was a hiccup and continues to be a hiccup. But now that I'm aware, like, hey, I need to be able to describe this, and then I need to be able to tell this person. I think as a native, many times it's like we kept it to ourselves, or we didn't know how to question something. If we did question it, we were told not to think that way. yeah, and I think that ability to speak, to be honest with what's going on inside of our head, um, as well as emotionally speaking, I think that all plays a role in terms of then being able to mentor. Now that I'm able to see, hey, this person is struggling with this. I certainly didn't want to share. If I was struggling, I was like, no, I can power through this. And now that I've become older, I feel like I've become wiser, and I know that, hey, I need help, and I will I will let someone know I need help.
Thanks for talking about that a little more. Yeah, that was just something I heard of, like that language and like not knowing like the words to describe what you're dealing with. And that's definitely like a very like identifiable barrier. What advice would you give to people who want to become scientists?
My advice is to go for it. Meaning, if you see an opportunity to be involved with science, take that opportunity. If you really are interested, seek scientists out, email them. There are ways that you can find more information about them. I think that there are many scientists who wouldn't mind getting a message, and then also I think that there would be many scientists who would be willing to talk about their experience. For myself, I got involved in science, as I said, when I was a sophomore in college. I got an opportunity to do a summer internship, and then that led to me continuing to do science work in Dr. Poirier's lab at the University of Arizona my junior year, my senior year. And then after my senior year, I decided that I wanted to work for a year at the VA, the Southern Arizona VA Hospital, Veteran Affairs Hospital in Tucson. And so I worked for a year as a respiratory physiology assistant, like a research associate, basically. And that's when I submitted my application to graduate school and got accepted. I think that as scientists, we want to talk, we want to share. I have not met a scientist who does not want to share what they do. And so in academia, that becomes more, it's really exciting. If you're on college campuses, or I know City of Hope does a lot of things, there's a lot of outreach. I think that certain like science associated institutions will hold for the public. I think Caltech, and just in Pasadena area, that's where I used to live, they do a lot of great work. So my advice is to really just get involved, meaning seek out information of where scientists are going to be presenting, or any public type of science interaction. Attend those, meet scientists, talk to them, ask them questions, and then follow up with them. If you really are interested in other things, you can always follow up. And I think that there's a trail that they can leave of like, hey, you know what, I don't do this work, but I know someone. Or, you know, there's this opportunity, and they can give further insight to that.
Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to check out our other interviews linked in the description box down below. Bye everyone.